Langston Hughes spread the news of a mother's blues. We believed it took a mother to nurture a son, a village to raise a child, a father for added guidance, protection, and smiles. All the while, Langston Hughes spread the news of a mother's blues. Because her life, son, ain't been no crystal stair. She's black. Or brown, with kinky hair coiled and tightly wrapped like perseverance's grip and choking out despair. My climb, my ascent on life's staircase, meant to inspire nerve and serve as fodder for your intended greatness. Through the darkness, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair, breaking generational curses with candid conversations. Yeah, talk is cheap and life is hard. But we kin folks, kin folks, kin folks, kin folks, kin folks, kin folks.
Hey y'all, El Monique here. I am the mommy and the host of Kinfolks. Welcome back to episode 3. Kinfolks is supported and sponsored by ViiV Healthcare, and we are here to navigate some of the more challenging conversations, create positive change, one conversation at a time. Generally, and often, I am joined by my co-host, my son, Omari the Rebel. He's at work somewhere in Brooklyn, y'all, right about now. So he will not be joining us today, but we have something special coming for you next episode. Today, I have 2 wonderful and awesome guests. You're going to love this mother and son duo, Mecca and Jamel. But first, we're going to take a moment and we're going to dive into a little bit of pop culture. Let's call it that. We're going to watch a video together, get a little bit of reaction, and then we'll dive into some of the questions that we discuss here on Kinfolks. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We need your support, y'all. You know we're on YouTube, Spotify, we're all over the place. And wherever you can't find us, that's where we need to be. Just reach out. So welcome, Mecca and Jamel. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well.
Okay. So before we get into digging into your personal business, because that's why you're here, I just want to know, have you heard anything about what I'm going to call the viral mess and madness of rapper Lil Boosie, also known as Boosie Badass? Have you heard anything about that?
No.
Okay, so let's watch that. Let's start with that.
So when your daughter came out and told you she was gay, it was nothing. I mean, she still can't bring her situation to our house. My daughter is grown.
Well, why? She's grown.
Because I don't want it to contaminate her other. It's a generation we raising. I don't want her to get contaminated to her other 6, 7 sisters who look up to her. I want them to bring me grandchildren the right way.
Yeah, Boosie crazy.
If I want grandchildren the right way, that's what I'm going to stand on. You know, if I don't want my other little girl to look at that and say, "What's that, Daddy?"
Contaminated.
To somebody she looks up to, it's not going to come around. My grandpa didn't let it. My daddy didn't let it. And I didn't let it. I just hope the one under me, when they take this throne, they don't let it. Because that's not what our family believe in. Like you say, we Southern Baptists. You know, I love me and my daughter relationship like this. But when she understands everything, she know Daddy don't go, she know. But that's what she chooses to do. But she know we don't go, we don't go for that. I'm like Whitney Houston, mama. Stay over there.
Man, I really don't even know where to start for real, because this ain't even my character. I don't really be getting on here and giving y'all what y'all want, but I feel like my daddy want me to give y'all what y'all want, and he want me to give him what he want as well. He always speaking on my sexuality. The whole world know that. It been about 2 years now that I'll be quiet. I keep quiet on the say nothing. I just go with the flow. I did everything in my power to understand that this is my father, regardless. Like, I'm gonna accept him and love him for who he is. So, I just seen he recently did an interview with Carisha, and he used the word contaminating and putting my siblings in it with that. Just me so mad. I love and respect my siblings with everything in me, and they respect me and love me with everything in them. When you getting on their nerves, I'm who they call. My siblings, most of my siblings, teenagers. Teenagers you don't want to let grow up. The first ever interview you did, you said, you found out I was gay, that I like girls and I had a girlfriend from a picture that went viral. That was a lie. I let that slide. I never addressed it. You found out I was gay a year before that. The incident happened in Jamaica when I was a gay B-word, when you called me a gay B-word. So if the world really knew all the things and the hurtful things you told me before, and I forgave you, you wouldn't even understand. And no matter how you feel, at the end of the day, I am your daughter. And every time I turn around, it's like you bashed me. The whole world can go against you, but I won't. Since I've been a little girl, I never would go against you. And I think I'm really fed up. He talking about God and how I grew up. I know my God from Nita, from my mama. My mama sent me scriptures every morning. My mama put me in the church home. I don't recall not one time I'm ever getting up with you and you taking me to the Lord's house. I don't never recall it. I didn't learn that from you. I learned to hustle from you. I learned to not let nobody play with me from you. Even if it's you. You gonna make sure your kids straight. You always gonna do that. But emotionally, mentally, you suck. You rather go to the internet and have a conversation with the internet about your kids before you come to us and have that conversation. He done did about 6, 7 interviews about me. He ain't never not have one sit down with me, myself, just him and Aviana, and ask me why you became that way, Fat. I would always not say something because I would feel like I'm not finna get on here and disrespect my pops. But it's like, you making me do that. They not even making me do that. You making me do that because you steady speaking on me. Like, I would respect if you just say, just one time, just say, my daughter know how I feel about that. Can we move on to the next question? I can never get that from you. I feel like you just don't be caring. You just don't care about my feelings no more.
I heard like a collective sigh. In the womb, that's what I call this space. Like rappers call it the lab. This is the womb because this is where things are born, nurtured, conceived, all of that. And, well, everyone, I left this part out of the introduction. Mecca is a therapist and owner of Moss Counseling Services. So if you're in the Charlotte area and you need a little help, Moss Counseling Services. So I really want to know, with any hat you want to wear, as a therapist, as a mom, as a daughter, just say something. Because I got a lot of somethings to say. When she said the thing about, because my daddy and I, no, he said, we like this. I couldn't really see the fingers. So in my head, it was kind of like, we like this. And I'm like, okay, yeah. Because I'm not feeling a lot of healthy, positive, bonding, affirming, or connecting. But I'm not the therapist, y'all. Right. So I'm going to let Mecca take this from any position you want to take this, just any part of it.
Yeah. That was pretty deep. I think for me, and I'm going to speak from the perspective of a parent, first and foremost. When I think about what she's saying and the emotions that she is presenting, it sounds to me like it's a feeling of rejection and a feeling of abandonment. And so when I think about that in general, as a daughter, I come from a aspect where I feel like I've had some of that rejection as well. Maybe not in reference to sexuality, but in reference to other things. And so I can't imagine like having that type of attitude with my child. Okay. When my child was a young person, he was always unique and he was different, we've got a lot of memories of some things because we're only 15 and maybe 15. I always put the half in there to make it sound good. So we're like 15 and a half years apart.
Oh.
Okay. I had my son at a very young age.
Okay.
And so when I think about we've had times where we've kind of hung out because we've hung out in the village and different things. And he's been amongst me when
that's New York,
New York City. That's the village, hanging out.
New York's neighborhood.
That part.
Wait a minute. What were you doing there?
Hanging out, chilling, just, doing what we do, right?
How do you identify, Mecca?
I identify as pansexual. Okay. At this point, I didn't identify as pansexual back then. I identified as lesbian back then.
Okay.
And so he would hang out with me and my little crew and be amongst us. But early on, first and foremost, I think people who have children who are under the LGBTQ umbrella, they recognize something. I didn't know specifically that my child was going to be gay, but he was unique in his own way, and so
I'm sorry. Did your mom just out you? Because we didn't even have this conversation. I just heard. I didn't know my child was going to be gay, and Jamel's sitting there. I'm not going to. I'm going to appear unaffected by this.
But I'm not ashamed of who he is, and what I'm hearing in this seems like shame and doubt, and you're worrying about society and the biblical aspect and various things. And
no, it's
me,
the siblings.
The siblings.
He doesn't want them contaminated, Mecca. Let's not misquote the man.
That piece too.
Okay.
And so to me is a slap in the face, in a sense, for the child. Because what I know for certain is whether or not my son was to have come out as whom he is, which he didn't even have to come out, I don't think, really. But
that's what you said.
I don't know. Maybe in his aspect, he did. But I remember, yes, in a sense, yes. But it was like, okay, it's no big thing. But I think that as parents, we have to be able to embrace our children, regardless of whatever it is that they may be going through, whether they find themselves being gay, lesbian, cisgender, and just heterosexual, whatever it is, we have to accept that and we have to embrace that. And so rejection to me is huge. And so when I think about from the perspective of being the therapist, and attachment issues and all of that, that emotional connection is so important. And what I'm hearing in this piece of things is that's not there. And so I'm wondering, that's a lot of trauma that's probably impacting this person, this child in this case. And to me, that's more important than anything.
As a therapist, when you talk about the trauma from the rejection, father rejecting who you are, what do you see? What results concern you for how that will show up in this young woman's life?
Yeah. So I could speak today because I won't say that I was outright rejected in a sense from my own father, but I felt rejection because there was not an emotional connection. And so what I see is looking for love in the wrong place.
Oh,
I see trying to find your identity in a sense.
Okay.
And being able to find love because that impacts a child when they don't have an emotional connection to the people that should be nurturing them. And those people are typically mom and dad.
I don't think I heard you, and I know they didn't hear it in the back. So, what impacts a child?
The
What was it?
nurturing of both parents in this case. But, I think that it definitely leads to feelings of, I'm not good enough, or I need to have love, or I need to identify people that can embrace me and accept me.
So I'm just going to try to mirror back in layman's terms, because I'm not a therapist, what I hear you saying. What I hear you saying is that it really should be about loving your child, and that your rejection of your child who is trying to discover who they are and live authentically, that can cause more harm than good.
Absolutely.
They can look for love in the wrong places, which can create different types of risks. It can create the types of risk that can impede physical safety, emotional safety.
Yes.
Definitely sexual health and wellness safety, when we're talking about the types of choices that we make because we just want to be accepted. We just want to be loved. So it sounds like I've been hearing, we need to set ourselves aside as parents, slightly remove ourselves. I'm going to say slightly. I know y'all take you out of it. I am still not over what my son told me. But... okay, I'm working on it. I'm taking myself out of it here. And in taking myself out of it, I'm always going to want to center my children. I mean, that's where my legacy lies. I'm not going to be here forever. I don't want to be corny about, they are the future, but they are.
Right.
And I hope I've left something behind that is nurturing and inspiring and not isolating. Not this.
Right.
I saw a lot. I saw and heard a lot of pain when I was listening to the young woman talk about how the first thing that really stuck out to me, and I notice it's just me as a writer and the whole wordplay, but she said something about he always tried to keep us straight. And I thought, yeah, damn right. That's why there's a problem right now. But I know that's not what she meant. I know that what she meant was he tried to support us in a way where our basic needs were met. I think that's what she meant when she made that comment. What I heard was something a little Freudian, though. I heard always tried to keep us straight.
Right.
And then so much about you're going to media, to the internet, to talk about, see, that's just what we are not. Okay. We're not talking about our children. No, we're talking with them, honey. Look. That's what we do in kin folks. It's not just about fussing, and I hope it's not my intention for it to ever be about hurt, harm, or put down.
Right.
We know some of our conversations will be challenging, but at the end of the day, it's about bonding, healing. Wait, what's my thing say? Bonding, talking, healing. That's what it's about. Bonding, talking, healing, growth.
Right.
And I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that when I listened to Lil Boosie. I didn't hear that when I listened to his daughter express the pain and how long she has stayed away from addressing her hurt publicly. So we're here to unpack all that, and for ourselves.
Right.
So, Jamel, give me a little feedback on your reaction. What did you think, feel? You saw this?
Yeah, so I would say for me it was interesting. Just kind of watching that in that particular reaction. Considering her father's display, particularly on whatever show or whatever that was that, he was sharing that sentiment. And so then when she's talking about, that he's never had this conversation with her, or that he would have different types of conversations with her, and it wouldn't be the same, then I'm just like, okay, well, why would you get on public media and essentially kind of try to distance yourself from your daughter in that type of way without also being able to confront her and have that conversation one-on-one? So that just kind of seems like really off-putting to me when I think about the fact that, okay, you're not really even considering her feelings or her emotions in that particular moment. And that I'm like, okay, well, it just seems like he's really just trying to make himself look good. But I'm like, but for whom? Who are you trying to impress? Like who's really going to matter based on how you are treating your daughter?
Right.
Because whomever that is, there's also going to be a completely different population of people who are going to see that you're kind of this person who does not respect their child, does not truly love their child, right? And so I also think about that there's so many other celebrities out there who have children who have come out that the response to those children has been completely the exact opposite. Right? So I think about, so many of those situations where parents are like, this is my child. I'm going to continue to support them, to love on them the way that they are and that they show up.
Gabrielle Union and her husband.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Forgive me for forgetting the name of the husband.
Dwayne Wade.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have enjoyed
The
watching
Wayans gentlemen.
their support of
Right.
Their child.
their daughter.
And that's the example that I was thinking about, specifically them. I'm like, okay, well, that's one very prominent couple,
Right.
right? Where lots of people know who they are, and yet you have two completely different responses to that.
This is true.
Right.
I noticed, I don't know if you were able to hear it, but I heard a little feedback from the live audience, and I heard one or two people say, Lil Boosie's crazy.
Yes.
Like they weren't affirming what he had to say.
Right.
But then, as you pointed out, I know that there are other audiences who would have. For me, that's sad and a little frightening.
Yeah.
But I know that exists. The young woman that's interviewing him is not one of those people. She does talk to him about acceptance, accepting his daughter. And in fact, I believe it opens with, why are you always in gay folks' business? It's kind of that type of a thing. So she was not supporting his isolation of his daughter. And I'm sure there's a lot for him to unpack as to why he feels like he needs to not only treat her this way, but publicly. So let's get into your business now. Your mom kind of hinted at something. And so I wanted to ask if there was a coming out for you. Can you share that moment and what that was like, Jamel?
Yeah,
well, wait a minute, though.
can.
Who came out to who first? Because
can I say something first?
Yes.
I want to say, after hearing that and hearing him, I want to say I'm sorry because I didn't intentionally mean to put him on blast about who he is. But to me, it's been it's not been a big deal. So who he is has just been so natural. I'm just like, okay, this is who he is. And so I'm an advocate, as you know, as well. And so I advocate for community. So to me, saying that was an unintentional outing for you, if that made you feel any kind of way. So I just wanted to put that on the floor.
Thank you. You're just
So-
determined to ruin my makeup today. Okay? All this love in the air. You're not going to make me cry, Mecca.
Okay.
I do have on some finishing spray, but you are not going to, I don't think the eyeliner is waterproof.
Okay.
And I'm going to compose myself so we can get through this.
Yes.
I don't mind crying though, because I am human and there is nothing wrong with having emotions. And I am sick of all the shit that equals not having emotions, like professionalism, composure, all the things that make us less human.
Yeah.
So if I feel like crying, I will. And Bobby, don't
Pass the
cut
tissue.
nothing. I don't care if it's an ugly cry. Hypocritically, though, Mecca, please don't make me cry.
I won't. I'll try not to.
I just love the love.
Yeah.
And the, no, this is bigger than love. This is respect.
Yeah.
What you just said, I mean, to look at your son and say, forgive me, I was not intentionally, because it's so normal and part of our lives that I didn't even look at it as an outing.
Exactly.
I think there are a lot of us that would aspire to that. And I love that about your relationship. I really do.
Thank you.
So was it hard to tell her?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. Actually,
did you know who she was when you told her?
I did. Well, because I think I was maybe, it was like 11 or 12 when she came out to me.
Okay, let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
So it was very interesting because I remember being really young, and there was this other woman that was around all the time. All right. And I was just like, this seems like that they're more than just friends. But it was never actually communicated. Right. So essentially, I'm being exposed to this. Right. And I'm like, okay, so to me, I'm like, it's quite obvious that, oh, my mom is romantically involved with this other woman, but they've not said that. So I remember there was just like this one time that she pulled me into her room and was like, I wanted to tell you something. Right. And I'm like, okay. And so she actually seemed way more nervous than I was about what she wanted to share. And so when she, came out,
What'd she say, Jamel? What'd she say?
I don't remember exactly what she said. But I remember feeling like, oh, okay, like I pretty much already knew that, like that's obvious. So it wasn't really a big deal for me, right?
How'd you feel?
But for me, I was just like, yeah, it's whatever. But also internally, for myself, I was just like, well, I probably am too, right? But I wasn't really sure at that point in time, right?
Okay.
Being
and 12 is young. You're
yeah, like 11, 12,
figuring out.
So it was just like a very kind of like interesting point in time, being there, being exposed to that. And then, like she said, like I spent a lot of time with her and in her social environments. So I was like 12, 13.
Did your mother's vulnerability foster any comfort for you? The fact that she was,
absolutely,
she's telling you this, even though you said,
so
I already knew, but
right. So with her telling me, it was in some ways it was kind of like, I'm this child, but I am now privy to what I would consider to be adult information. Right. So this information that now I am knowledgeable about adult things. I've been invited to the conversation. Right. So it's like, how we say on social media, Jamel has entered the chat. It was kind of very kind of reminiscent of that at that time. Like, oh, you've been invited to the conversation that, oh, I respect you enough that you're old enough to be able to handle this information. And the way that it was presented in a way that I know that she wanted to be very delicate with that presentation of information, right? Because there really was no way for her to know how I was going to react or respond to that type of
Mecca,
situation.
were you a therapist at the time?
No.
Okay, I was just wondering because I was kind of curious as to, did that inform upon like how you So you were just mommy.
Yeah, just mommy. Hadn't even went to school for a bachelor's at that point. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, it made me really comfortable. So by the time, like, I got to my point of feeling like, okay, I'm ready to share and be authentic with who I am, I had already been with her to the village, like she had shared. Been out on the Christopher Street Pier,
Ooh.
all type of places, all through the night. And so I was very much exposed to like the
diversity of the
and,
LGBT
right.
community. I'm about to clean this up. You're going to stop talking right now. The diversity of the LGBT community, particularly in the Northeast.
Right. Right.
For those of you who don't know, the Village Pier.
Right.
Yes.
So,
it's a very spirited place.
Yes. And especially back, I would say, well, this was like the early 90s, right? So there was a lot to really see and to learn about in that environment. Right. So and we were there so frequently that it became pretty much kind of like just like my usual or regular environment. So I was like so comfortable in that space.
Any favorite places? I'm going in 2 weeks. I will be thinking about you. I wasn't going to the pier, but I am now.
Well, I mean, I would say like it's hard to say, right? Because back then versus what it is now, it's completely different.
Yes, it is.
Type of environment.
But not bad.
No, not bad.
It is very different. I was there last year or 2 years ago for the 4th of July. It's been gentrified.
Yeah, yes, it has been.
So it is very different.
Yeah.
It's prettier.
It is.
I can definitely say it's prettier. It offers more when it comes to places to eat. And so I'm enjoying it. But your mom and I are close in age and very close in birthday. So we're both native New Yorkers. So we share that experience of the village and the pier, and probably hung out at similar clubs when we were partying and all of that. So I know the difference of what it used to be. I can appreciate some of what it is now. And I will be thinking about you when I'm there soon. I just wanted to like, where should I go? Where should I be?
I miss the old version of it.
He's old school.
Just the rawness, the culture that was really kind of communicated in that space, right? Because really what you're talking about was essentially a safe haven for Black and brown queer people. And so for me, I was like, okay, well, this is something that I get to see and that I'm exposed to. Right. And so for me, getting to the point of coming out, I was like, well, I already am connected to that community without really being like officially a part of it, but I've been around it enough to feel comfortable because I think I was maybe at the age of 15 or 16 when I officially like came out.
What was that like?
So I wrote her a letter. I remember specifically writing a letter. Just because it was a lot easier to communicate that way. And I don't remember exactly what that letter, like what I really said in the letter, but I know that I had referenced like a friend of mine, and I was like, oh, well, there's no future like relationship between me and this person who's a female. And so my mom wrote back.
Wow.
And essentially was like, oh, if this is your way of trying to tell me that you're gay.
Oh, that sounds so Mecca.
Right. So she's like, essentially, if this is your way trying to tell me that you're gay, you didn't have to tell me. I already know.
Yeah.
Right. So
Wow.
it was really interesting getting that response, because I was just like, well, that was really anticlimactic. Right. So like that's how I thought of it at the time. And just thinking, because I'm like, here we are, it's the mid-90s, and I'm just thinking
But
about,
Jamel,
like,
this was your life. This wasn't Noah's Ark.
right.
I mean, you know.
But it was, but I expected it to be more, right? And thinking about just my friends who also identify somewhere within the LGBTQ community, and how they couldn't necessarily do that, right? They didn't have the ability or the comfort with their own parents to be able to have those conversations. And so, when I would talk to my friends and share, oh, it's like, oh yeah, my mom's a lesbian, they're like, oh wow, that's really cool. Right. Like, and so many of my friends, especially at that time, were very interested in meeting my mom. And so we would be like, I'm like, okay, come on over to my mom's house, come hang out. And they would find comfort with her as well.
Wow.
In that space, which was really cool and comfortable, so that people can just be themselves. And I would say that that's like one of the things that, like, I feel like my mom has always tried to push, right? Which was essentially like a mantra for me for many years. She will always say, do you, right? Which, could mean so many different things. But the reality of it is, it was just that, follow what's going to make you happy, right? You only really have one life to live, and you have to do and follow your own path.
That part.
And so thinking about all of those things, that like, that's something that for me, I've continued to think about since, like, as I've grown up, thinking about, well, if I'm making this particular decision, there's a reason why I'm making that decision. And that's also enabled me and empowered me to not really have many regrets.
Oh,
right? Because
that's
if I
wonderful.
can always think about, okay, I've made my decisions because this is what I felt was right for me, and at that particular point in time, then it's very easy for me to look back and be like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, there was a reason why I made that decision, and there's no regret associated with that.
That is awesome. That is really huge. I am exactly where Maslow says I'm supposed to be. Okay. On the hierarchy of needs. Okay. That triangle. Okay. So I'm at that point where I am concerned about my legacy and what I will leave behind and the impact that I'm making on the world, and not having any regrets. And that is wonderful. And so far I can literally say that if right now I just stopped breathing, I probably only have one, like, regret. And it's directly connected to one of my children, because I really believe that my only job is to be able to love, protect, and guide them. That's it. Every mommy worth their salt wants to know that the day they close their eyes, that their children are able to function independently and successfully. And I use the last word loosely, because success is relative, subjective even. We all have different views of what that means.
Right.
For me, it's more based in happiness than it is whatever you've got in your wallet. Okay. Are you feeling good about it? You decide you just want to be a hobo. Okay. But you better be the best damn hobo you can be.
Right.
Okay. I mean, really. I want to just go back a little bit to something you said about coming out to your mom and how anticlimactic it was. What did you think it was going to be? Like, what didn't happen that you thought it was going to be?
I don't know. I don't really know.
You should have had a turn up party.
I mean, they almost
I
started
don't- I
out
don't-
like the acceptance, like just the
Yeah, like-
details, like what? Like that's it? I already knew. Like
Right.
you're not gonna pass out. You're not gonna scream.
Well,
What were you expecting?
So, but I think what it was probably that use of language, right? The language around I already knew, right? So, like thinking about that in particular. So, I think for me, where I'm like, this was something that I was holding on to so closely, so tightly, and then for her to say like, "Oh, I already knew," and then it's kind of like, "What?" Like, like, maybe like I wasn't holding on to it as closely as I thought, right? And so,
Or
there
maybe
wasn't
you just had an attentive mommy who knew her child
Right.
in a way.
Well, that's what she said. I've been different.
Holding on to it was
Yeah, I knew he was unique from very early on, and so it wasn't surprising to me. But I think I get what you're saying. I think like, and this is part of my own stuff, I probably too, because maybe that emotional piece of embracing it, you needed to have more of during that time.
Mhm.
Because to just be like, well, I already knew that. That ain't no new news. You know what I'm saying? Like, for real. So maybe like, even like with this child that we were just talking about, like having the emotional connection.
Mhm.
And, part of that is also too, because of my upbringing, not being very emotionally. Like I have never been like this clingy, huggy, duggy type. My own daughter had to tell me some stuff about that, but that's a whole nother segment of kid folks when you get to the girls and all of that. But I think maybe that piece, from what I'm hearing you say, was probably missing. Like you needed to have that time to embrace your emotions around it.
I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know if it was really kind of related to emotions.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what the why I really felt that it was anticlimactic, but I feel as though maybe it was just because I just expected more of a response.
Was it the
Like-
most difficult conversation you've ever had? And if it wasn't, what was?
Most difficult. I mean, it was a written conversation, right? So,
right.
given that it was a written conversation, was it super difficult initially?
Okay.
Like deciding, okay, do I put this in this letter? Do I share this information now?
How about verbal conversation?
Initially, but in terms of like verbal conversations, I was like, I can't really think of any particular situation where I can be like, this was a really hard
Wow.
conversation to
Go ahead,
have.
mommy of the year.
That I'm not.
But that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
your son is sitting here saying,
Yeah.
I can't really think of a time where the conversation was so challenging or so difficult. For
Right.
some of us, there are moments that that resonate. When I had to tell my mom that, yes, I'm lesbian, I still remember it. And it was not easy.
Yeah.
And truth be told, I was kind of busted in something. And so I didn't even have the opportunity to decide, now I'm going to share this. So I just think it's commendable that you're struggling to think of, well, what was a difficult conversation?
Yeah.
May I ask another question?
Yes.
Okay, so in thinking of conversations that might be challenging for us, I want to move slightly in a different direction. And this might mean discussing a conversation you had at a much younger age. When we talk about challenging conversations, health and wellness, one of the first things that comes to mind for me is body autonomy. So, Jamel, tell your mom what you remember about maybe one of your earlier conversations about body autonomy. What did you learn from her? What do you remember her talking to you about when it came to the autonomy and agency you would have over your own body? If there was a conversation like
I don't know that there has been. At least I don't recall there being a conversation specifically around body autonomy.
Any messaging? Because everything isn't let me talk to you. I mean, sometimes we just live in.
Perhaps it had been, but I was like really young that I don't remember, because I do recall that happening, perhaps more so with my sister.
Okay.
For me, like I just don't really recall that too much. Like there might have been some conversation like around, oh, don't let anybody touch you.
That's
If
body
somebody
autonomy.
tells you, let me know. But
Yeah,
like
that's
I don't really remember like in depth what those conversations were like, when they would have happened, what, like how we came to the point of saying like this is a conversation that we need to have. But I feel as though like if that was part of the conversation, it might have been somewhere in the context of like my entry into school. It might have been like around that time, but it's not something that like is a prominent thing in my mind about, oh, this is a conversation.
So it sounds like there was messaging and possibly ongoing once you got to a position wherein you were now not completely in the eyesight and protection of your mother.
Right.
Like, okay, so now she's releasing you. You're going off to school. And now she feels like, okay, let me tell you some things.
Yes.
What do you, am I on point here? What do you remember?
Actually, and so for the thing that would happen with me, Jamel, because I was such a young mother, my mother played a key part in parenting Jamel as well. And so she also was very involved in trying to, like, I'm just going to say, blocking some stuff. Because there's even conversations we've had like about, like condoms and using condoms and different things of that nature. Like, at a certain age, I'm like, okay, he's getting older. He needs to know about this stuff. Like, I need to be having these conversations. And so I would have the conversations, and my mother's like, well, why are you having this conversation with him? He's only 10 or he's only 9 or something like that. And I'm like, it needs to happen early on. And so those conversations would be the things that I would begin to have conversation with him about. And I'm sure at that age, he was not like considering sexual intercourse or, connected to anyone, but it was just important.
You don't have to tell me. I know she's sitting right here.
I understand. No.
Well, he might have had some interest, or somebody. That's when it starts, though, and that's why it's so important that we do educate. And so, for me, it was more or less like, how do I protect my child in this aspect? How do I educate you in these areas so that you can be aware that it's okay to have the conversations about sex. We can talk about it. Everybody does sex. I mean, it is a pleasurable thing, so it's not as though it's going to be something that is never going to happen. So I didn't pretend that it didn't happen. When I was growing up, conversations about sex were
sorry, she got me smiling. I'm still stuck on everybody's doing it, and it's a pleasurable thing.
And it's a pleasurable thing,
like, oh, yes, Lord.
Yeah, but the thing was, like, our foreparents didn't have these conversations.
No.
And especially, to me, that is so important. Like, we have to do this educational piece. And so I, even as a young mom, though I've got lots of flaws in terms of parenting, but that was one thing that I was really diligently trying to educate my child on. I also have a brother that I lost in 94 who also passed away from the virus. And so that probably really pushed me more over HIV. He was positive and passed away in 1994. And so that probably even also pushed me to another level in terms of protection, and I don't even know.
And probably also the fact that since you had a child when you were very young.
Yeah, well, absolutely. The two together, like, people do it. I was doing it, so don't think, like I'm not ignoring it.
I completely know.
I don't even know even if at the time that, like, if you had came out, I mean, I don't even think any of that was conversation, but it was just me putting it out there in this case and trying to educate in that aspect because as I said, being a young parent, when we deal with like this young lady dealing with a rejection and abandonment from her own family, it's going to impact the way that she responds in relationships. And so for me, having dealt with rejection and abandonment in that aspect, I know for me too, just like he said, it was a factor. So those factors played a part in me parenting my kids. And I always wanted to keep the door open in terms of conversations about things of this nature.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I almost want to apologize because I think I zoned out for just a second. We have so much in common, and it hurts me when pain and trauma is a thing that we bond over.
Yeah.
So I forgot for a moment when you said it. My brother.
Yeah.
So my brain went back to what year was it that I helped my mother bury my brother?
Yeah.
Who succumbed to AIDS.
Yes.
In the let's see. Right after I had Omari the Rebel, my brother at 29 years old succumbed to AIDS. We didn't even use the language at the time of it was it was just AIDS. It was a different time. Stigma was at an all-time high. Access to medications that prolonged life. We weren't even at a level where we were talking about you equals you and become undetectable. Right. And we weren't even talking about that.
Absolutely.
I was having the horrible experience of at one point in time going to 2 funerals a month and everybody was under 35 years old. My mother was literally bonding with other women over the loss of children. And for a moment, I was back there when I was listening to you say, and my brother, and this is what was happening. And I'm glad we're not living in that time right now. I'm glad we have, science has taken us to a point where people who are living with HIV in their bodies are able to live long, healthy lives. We have PrEP in pill form and in every 3-month injectable form so that people, again, have an opportunity to stave off those things. What concerns me, though, is that I think it's a bit of a Pyrrhic victory. So we have all this now.
Yes.
This is what I see. Because I am still in the industry of HIV intervention and prevention. I see that Black men who have sex with men are still the number one rising demographic for who makes up that pool of who is contracting HIV. I see that those who are not contracting it, I'm from New York, but I live in Charlotte. Syphilis rates are off the charts. During the COVID pandemic, there were PrEP parties going on. And for those of you who don't know, PrEP parties are sex parties where the people who participate, primarily men, would say, well, I'm on PrEP. So it's safe for us to have unprotected sex because I'm on PrEP and you will not be able to contract HIV and neither will I. And that much is true. But it's not true when it comes to herpes, gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, anything else you can think of.
Right.
So we started seeing rising rates of that, which is probably a good time for me to ask. So what'd your mama tell you? I mean, she told you about condoms. Was there anything else? Can you remember any conversations about your sexual health and wellness outside of use a condom?
I mean, well, there's a lot of make sure you're using a condom, wrap it up. She'll constantly bring in fistfuls of condoms and plop them down and throw them at people.
Throw them at people?
Right.
She just
be like, I could just be sitting there like watching TV.
Oh, I wish I had some right now. The visual is
like
just
on my lap, and I'm be like, oh, what is this for? Right? Like, so it was a lot of that. But we actually recently had a conversation. And I was saying I remember that one of the very early things that I remember specifically around HIV and AIDS, but certainly like this is after my uncle had passed. And, we are really, since I was born in 1981, So 1981, we are now like entering the AIDS epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's essentially always been on my radar, like just what I've
Okay.
known. But I remember that she had come home one time with a VHS tape of the film Kids. And so that particular film, like I didn't know what it was about. It says kids.
That's what we had before streaming, y'all. We had VHS.
Yes.
They were about this big. You put them in what we called VCRs.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the cover of the tape. It's kids written in like red, yellow, blue, green, whatever, primary colors. So I was like, oh, okay, there's something interesting. Meanwhile, I'm like maybe 14. So I put it in, watching it, and it opens with this scene of these very young people engaging in sex. And he's talking about, oh, you know, I always like virgins and this, that, and that, right? So I'm just watching this.
They're having sex.
Yeah.
You just made my life harder. I've been sitting here talking about how I'm still trying to embrace that whole news of my son talking about what he's doing. And did you just sit here and say your mom gave you a porno movie?
Well, it was a porno.
Porno movie?
It's not a porno.
They didn't actually show
but
the act.
like
okay.
you can
Tell that they was,
infer this is what's going on based
Mm-hmm.
on the scene.
It was tasteful, and
Yeah.
you got the idea that there was some intimacy happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, the entire premise of the film is that there's this one guy who's engaging in unprotected sex with a whole bunch of people in New York City, and that essentially he is infecting everybody. Right.
Oh.
And towards the end of the film, he sleeps or somebody sleeps with one girl who recently found out that she was HIV positive, but it was unconsensual sex and she was like intoxicated and sleeping.
Oh, wow.
So it was just one of those things where watching that, right, and seeing all of these kids engage in these types of behaviors where I'm like, this is really interesting. I was like, one thing, some parts of it were really cool, right? Where I'm like, oh, they seem to be really free, enjoying the city, doing all of these things. They're having a lot of fun. But then the sexual component of it, I was just like, this seems so far removed from my realities with like my friends and how we interact with each other. I was like, we don't do these things.
What
But
things?
like,
Did you mean
a lot of the things that they were doing.
you weren't sexually
like
active, or
the sexual activity, like if it was happening within my friend group, no one was really talking about it.
okay.
And then a lot of just the other social things that they were doing, the drug use and things of that nature.
Okay.
That was depicted in the film. I was just like, that's not really
Okay.
what's happening in my immediate world.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, you know, seeing that it was being passed to all of these people, I was just like, this is a really scary reality. Right. And so, and then just couple that plus having lost my uncle to the virus and just hearing kind of the conversations that were happening around the family with regards to that, then this idea of, oh, well, he looked so terrible, we need to do a closed casket. All of these different things and just the emotions that were attached to other people. I was just like, oh, I would never want to be that. Right. I don't want to ever essentially be a statistic to be, oh, yet another gay Black person that has HIV and is dying of AIDS. Right. So that was always something that was always in the forefront for me.
And I could see why, having lived through that era. It was, as you might imagine, probably the most traumatic thing my mother ever experienced in her life.
Yeah.
And I think I'm pretty resourceful. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I will never be strong enough to bury a child. Never. I don't care what anybody tells you, faith, this and that. I'm not going to be. So I was there for my mom in assisting her with everything she needed. to funeralize my brother. Again, he was 29 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our challenges was finding a funeral home that would actually receive and accept his body. I mean, this is what we were dealing with in the 80s. There was one place, I remember my mom just being horrified. Initially, she felt good because they said yes. But then they explained how there was going to be this glass, like you wouldn't be able to touch him. There would be the casket would be like glass encased, on the top, and all of this again was about. And this is even after a person. I mean, if he's in the casket, he's passed away.
Yeah.
But we didn't know then what we know now, and so ignorance and fear was running rampant through our communities. And so for families who were losing and had lost loved ones, the grief was compounded because now I can't even bury or have some type of memorial for my loved one without dealing with the stigma, the hurt. I mean, it was a lot. Just what we faced in visiting our loved ones who were hospitalized. Big red signs like that's the AIDS wing. You know, it was that.
Yeah.
I had a nurse walk in once and see me feeding my brother, who still had his wits about him. He could hear, he understood what was going on. His body may have become emaciated, and he wasn't the virile young man that he had previously been, but there was nothing wrong up here. And she scolded me. It was, "Where's your gown? You don't have on any gloves. I wish I would be standing there. I want to have babies one day. I would not be." And he could hear. And this is only our third episode. I'm not ready to be canceled yet, so I'm not going to tell you exactly what I said to her. But I let her know you probably don't have to worry about anyone impregnating you. And you can leave. Because you're being insensitive. And I expected more of a healthcare provider. I understand again that we knew less then. And often ignorance breeds fear.
Right.
But I was expecting more. I just was expecting more compassion. So I'm really happy that you ended up with your mom, young mommy or not. She seemed to have enough wherewithal to know that these are challenging conversations that my mother, who is supporting me, might not be ready for. But I know that at the time, my little boy is going to need this. Most of us don't want our children. We want them to be better than us. We don't want them to repeat our mistakes. We want them to be better than us in every shape, form, or fashion. So was it helpful? Even though you didn't see yourself a lot. You said, okay, so we weren't doing the drugs, and a lot of this wasn't really relatable, and some of it was a little frightening, but was it helpful in your life?
I mean, I think so. It's one of the films I enjoy the most. I like watching it.
I forgot about the film.
But it's just one of those things that it was just like I was inundated essentially with kind of like these reminders about, okay, these are the reality.
Do you know your status?
Yes, I know my status.
Do you think if your mom weren't who she is? Now, I know this is like, okay, I'm really going out here because how do you know what you would have done? I get it. Just play along. But if your mom wasn't who she is, you think you would know your status? Do you think you would have the outlook that you do when it comes to your own sexual health and wellness if you had a mom who didn't talk to you, wasn't just walking around throwing condoms at you, wasn't sharing cinema that talked about, okay?
I don't know. Because I think when it comes down to it, right? So I think about the very, very first time getting tested, right? I think it's really scary to do that, right? It's really scary
Yeah.
to do that. And for me, the very first time that I got tested, I was I want to say in my 30s. It was like the
Oh,
very first
wow.
time that I got tested. And so like leading up to that, it was always just like, oh, this is such a scary thing to do, right?
Mhm.
And so we didn't
Because
have
why?
conversations around PrEP. That wasn't a thing, you know, so that's
Okay.
much more recent.
Yeah.
But thinking about it, it was always kind of like in my head, right? Where I was just like, what if? What if I went in there
Mhm.
and they were like, oh, your results say that you're positive?
Mhm.
And I was always like, I wouldn't know how to respond to that,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Because to me, like I think about just the incredible amount of shame that would be associated with that,
Oh, wow.
right? Because this is my
Wow.
mother, right? Because this is my mother. Because I've had all of these different experiences
Oh, no, you're going to have to
and
unpack that.
and
Shame because this is my mother?
yes,
What does that mean?
that's where I'm going to, right? Because there's been so many of these experiences where here's condoms, use condoms, look at this, do this, right? And so therefore, if something were to have happened, right, I
Okay.
know that in my head it would have been like, there is every single reason that you would have known to protect yourself. And so therefore
Wow.
for you to end up contracting this virus, then it really is going to be on you because it's like you knew better. So therefore, to me, it was always kind of thinking about, okay, there's that level of shame that would be associated with that, right? But then there's also thinking about my relationship with like my grandmother, the experience that she had losing her son, my uncle, thinking about that as well and being like, I wouldn't want to do that to them, to put them in that situation where they would be at risk of losing me because of a decision that I made regarding sexual health and safety. And so it was always thinking about those things that I was just like, that would be a very hard thing to do, right? To sit there at some clinic. And my mom used to say this, you don't want to be the one sitting up at the clinic looking stupid because
Oh, Lord.
you've made this decision. And that was always on my mind, right? I was like, I don't want to be sitting there at the clinic looking stupid because I didn't use protection.
Okay, camera person. Off me, on them. Wow, that was
yeah. So I like, so therefore I vividly remember like the very first time getting tested and being like, oh, this is what this process is like. And then they were like, we'll call you. And I'm like, now I gotta sit there and wait.
That's how it used to be.
I was like, okay.
Yeah, so you're on pins and needles for
Right.
It was terrible back in the day, honey. 2 weeks.
Right.
I know just what you're talking
And
about.
so, but when
that
finally
was tough.
receiving the news, right, and being like, your test came back negative, and I'm like, okay. Like, now that I know, then it's an opportunity now to reevaluate. Right. And that's how it really kind of felt for me, because I was just like, okay, there were times when I know that I was not careful, but then it becomes, okay, now that you know what your status is, there's power in that. Right.
Oh,
like,
yes.
I really believe that there's power in that. And then once you are aware, then you can be like, okay, so here's where I stand. What do I need to do going forward to ensure that that's the case and continues to be that way? So when they had first started talking about PrEP, it was I had watched some type of documentary, and it was talking about San Francisco, and that San Francisco had this goal of trying to get to 0 new cases within a particular year, and
2025.
They were talking
That's
about
how it started.
right. So they were talking about the efforts that they were making, and they're following this one guy who was on PrEP. And so, I'm watching, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, I didn't really know of anybody that was using PrEP. I had heard of people who had used PEP.
Which is after.
Right. So like I've had
it's like the morning after pill for HIV.
Like, oh, I found out that this guy so now I'm using PEP. So I wasn't familiar with either of them really until like one, I saw the documentary about PrEP, but then through conversations with others about PEP. And so like I was like, okay, well, let me go and see if I can get that because I feel as though like that can be tremendously helpful and it can make a really big difference. That even though, each provider, they're going to give you the spiel and they're going to say, you need to get tested this frequently. You need to do all of these different things.
Oh, can I do it? I've given the spiel so many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. It has an efficacy rate of 99.6, I believe. So if you have an encounter with someone who is living with HIV in their bodies and you are on PrEP, whether that be the encounter came as a result of a sexual experience, consensual or not, or an accidental needle prick, then you won't have to worry about contracting HIV. Now, what PrEP will not do, it will not prevent you from becoming someone's mommy or daddy before you are prepared to. It will not stave off HIV, herpes, gonorrhea, chlamydia, or syphilis. So I suggest that you still perform safer sex. That means condoms and other latex barriers that you will use with a water-based lubricant. Nothing that is has oil in it. So no shea butter, no baby oil, no Vaseline, none of that. All that stuff makes condoms porous and you might as well not be wearing one. So just make an appointment, and every 3 months you will be tested to make sure that your status still remains HIV negative and that you can continue to take PrEP. And after that, it's all good, because when we are safe, and this is real, when we feel safe, whatever we are doing is better. So I have a little allegory that I tell people when I meet them and I'm doing this. I used to be a PrEP navigator. And I would ask, I said, have you ever been to an amusement park? Jamel, have you ever been to an amusement park?
I love them.
So you ride rides?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So when the person comes by and they say, okay, I'm going to strap you in, I'm going to do this, do you say, no, that's all right? Or do you let them do it?
Oh, no, absolutely.
You let them do it.
Yeah.
So you let them provide the protection. You let them strap you in. And then the ride is so much better, ain't it? I mean, when you get to the top, you can just go, woo! Because you're all strapped in. You feel safe.
Yes.
Now the ride is better.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
I know you're following me
Less
here.
fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when we practice safer sex.
Yeah.
And for some of us, PrEP is part of us. It's part of that.
Yeah.
I know we're winding down and we're running out of time, and I'm so enjoying both of you. I really, really am. And thank you so much for being here and being so candid. We've talked about some things that have been a little challenging and conversations that many people don't have. So I want to begin to close with this. I want you each to tell each other how you have made the other better as a result of being in each other's lives.
Okay.
Yeah, whoever wants to go first can go first.
I can start. Okay. So I think for you, I think you've made me better in the sense of, so like I had shared before that it's always been kind of like that mantra of do you,
Mhm.
right? So I think that particular kind of mantra, but also the experiences that I've had, though some, particularly my grandmother, would argue I should not have had those experiences, right?
Mhm.
I think that just having that exposure and also having the encouragement, right, to be like, okay, live your life authentically.
Mhm.
I think to me that has made me better,
Mhm.
right, as a person, where it's like, okay, I get to, and I use that intentionally, get to, right, I get to do things and show up in a way that's me, right, regardless of what everybody else is going to think, but it's me, right? So I get to do that.
Mhm.
So people might think, oh, well, he's a little weird, like whatever. Oh, I'm like, okay, so you think that? That's cool, right? Like I own it. Like
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with that. I'm like, because for me, I was like, well, I'm not really trying to be like anybody else anyway. So
That
Hello?
part.
therefore,
Yes.
it doesn't really matter. But I think about that. I also think about just the high level of independence, perseverance, um, that essentially like I've developed over time, right? Because like my mom and I, which like we did not really talk about, in this interview, but we've experienced homelessness together. Right.
Mhm.
And so thinking about all of those types of experiences, I'm
Mhm.
like, that has very much shaped me into the person that I am.
Yeah.
Right. And so as much as she's invested in the community, and I was like, I am myself as well to an extent, and very much interested in the larger and broader community, the people trying to be of service.
Mhm.
What do you do for a living?
Well, right now I'm a doctoral student
Oh,
in organizational
yes.
science
What
and
science?
organizational science. So
Okay.
I study that here at UNC Charlotte.
Is that my alma mater?
Mhm.
Is that your passion?
So
I'm moving away from asking people what they
Can I
do for a
stop
living.
him for a minute? He's minimizing the things he's done.
Oh, please.
Jamel has
Tell us.
4 masters,
Oh, yes, that was minimizing.
and he is currently working on his PhD, which he should be finishing maybe what,
in
2.5 years.
2 years or so.
Okay,
Awesome.
so
Can I come to the party?
sure,
'Cause I
and
know
you
it's
know it's
gonna
going to
be
be
a
a
big-
turn up, right?
I know.
Virgo style.
Me.
But
Yes,
I just
Virgo style.
I just wanted to put that out there. So yeah, and he has a work
Wow.
history, but now is a student.
What are your masters in?
So my
You
first
have a life
master's,
for a master? Like,
yeah,
what
my
else are
first
you
master's
doing?
is in higher education and student personnel administration.
Okay.
Then I have the one after that would be an MBA in management and marketing, a master's in communication with a focus in digital technology, and then a master's in
We so need to talk after this.
master's of arts in sociology as well,
Wow.
which is
Yeah.
which is
Which
in
is the recent one.
connected to
Okay.
my PhD in organizational science.
That is wonderful.
And so
So
And
excelling.
so why you should not need prep or anything else. Because I'm just thinking like, and you got time to cannot have time to have
but
sex
it's
or,
funny
or
because it's
anything.
like
That's
it's one of those things where I was just like, huh. I was like, I take this. I mean, I do
school.
well, I'm now on the bi-monthly shot, so I get the injection. But then I'm also like, okay, well, should I even continue to do that? Because I'm like,
So busy.
yeah, I'm like, nothing's really happening. So I'm
That's
like,
now. You better keep it moving.
so I'm like, but it's also kind of like in my mind, I'm like, you just never know when something might
And
happen.
you don't want to be in a clinic and something stupid.
That
Right.
part.
Don't want to be caught in the clinic.
I'm just
looking
parroting
stupid.
her, y'all.
Yes, that
So
part.
therefore, I'm like, well, we just continue to
Mhm.
do that. And this way I can be like, I'm always good.
You
Right.
And I
good.
can make sure that y'all
You
And I
good.
think even more importantly, like you said about there's power in knowing.
Yes.
Right.
That has to do with knowing your status, but
Mhm.
the fact is that you have access to information that allows you to make choices that are best for you.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, this has just been so awesome, and I have really enjoyed being able to spend time with both of you.
Mhm.
Before we close, Mecca, how has Jamel
Mhm.
changed your life?
Mhm. So, as I said before, being a young parent, having this feeling of lack of love and connection, Jamel has been the key, I think, to pushing me forward in a direction that was when he talks about perseverance and being motivated to do things differently. I think that he's been at the forefront of that. My daughter's 10 years younger. So for the first portion of my life, being a young mom, of course, I made a lot of mistakes, right? Or I've done a lot of things and primarily for survival mode. But what it's done is it's pushed me into being motivated to make a difference, to show my kids that, they can be able to engage in, as he said, like, doing what you want, being able to go with whatever is going to make you happy and to be able to embrace life as a whole. And so even watching him today, as we talk about these four masters and his motivation to continue to move forward and some of the things that he does, it just pushes me to be a better person as a whole. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. This has been Kin Folks. Go out and vote. Jamel
Yes.
has 4 masters, which means he's probably in insurmountable student loan debt. Go out and vote, y'all. I'm just leave it there.
No
Okay,
debt.
go out and vote, y'all.
Excuse me. There's no debt.
No debt.
What?
No debt.
No. They pay him.
No debt.
I have to talk to you about that too.
What?
I'm still at
No.
31,000 and
No.
I'm not
They pay him.
anywhere. And that's from bachelor's and grad school.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Whoa, I got it. Wow. Thank you for joining us. Like, subscribe. This has been Kin Folks. Asada Nairobi. I love you, baby.